All right, welcome back to the Canadian Gun Vault. You know, I'm sitting alone here and deep in the vault and thinking to myself, what am I going to discuss for my next podcast? Well, I gave it a little bit of thought and I thought, you know, what's relevant? What's going on right now? You know, certainly in the firearm community, perhaps something that I can relate to. And the subject of Beowulf mags comes up. And for those of you that are unfamiliar with firearms, you know, there's that AR-15 that everybody seems to paint up as being a really evil rifle. And so there's this AR-15, and it's got a magazine that originally holds 30 rounds, but now it's been limited to 5, unless, of course, it's a pistol magazine, in which case you can use it in the rifle. And if not, there's these Beowulf magazines. So a few years back, these Beowulf magazines hit the scene, the firearms community. And, of course, they were designed for a cartridge that was much larger called 50 Beowulf. And it's like this big, fat, you know, heavy bullet. And it's very powerful, you know, and we ended up doing a video on it. If you check out our YouTube channel, the Canadian Gun Vault, you'll find that we did a video on the Beowulf, 50 Beowulf AR-15 rifle made by Alexander Arms. But what people don't know is we actually had to do that video twice, which was really frustrating because I love shooting that rifle, but it does beat you up. So, I mean, here I am, you know, finally importing. You know, a Beowulf upper using I-run guns, and I'm, you know, importing it into the country, and I'm, you know, letting the RCMP know it's coming up. It's coming up through the usual importation channels, legitimate ones, and of course, it comes in, and it comes with this magazine, and this magazine is you know, strangely pinned to like 3 rounds, and I'm like, well, that doesn't make any sense, and I'm like, I'm not sure what that's all about, and so then, you know, just dialing it back a bit, we've got these, you know, 50 Beowulf magazines that are made for a much bigger cartridge. And of course, you know, we were really happy to know as the firearm community that it would also hold .223, but it would hold 14 rounds of .223. So I guess there was a ruling, you know, that was okay. Because the way the law had been written, you know, the RCMP, the CFO's office approved its use, and there was a bulletin that was sent out saying that, you know, you could have these Beowulf magazines that hold like 14 rounds of .223, and you can use them, you know, and there's no problems with that, like legally. And I was genuinely surprised, you know, to see that the, you know, the powers in charge of making decisions like this suddenly granted us the ability to, you know, triple the magazine capacity on, you know, ordinarily 5-round rifles, like the AR-15. So here we are with this AR-15 that now holds 14 rounds, and we're like, hey, that's, you know, halfway back to where we used to be, you know, back in the 90s. You know, used to be able to have 30 rounds. You know, for the people that have actually loaded 30-round magazines, I'll tell you right now, it's actually a bit of a chore. And after you do it a bunch of times, like, you start to load like 5 and 10. 10, I thought, would always make a, you know, just a much better number. And, you know, if hand pistols are 10 and rifles are 10, and, you know, I think that more people would be happy. And I don't think that there'd be any, you know, compromising of public safety, you know, just to make 10 across the board for simplicity's sake, just for, you know, clarification for all the people out there that, you know, are owning these things, because, of course, it was only a few years later that the 50 Beowulf magazine that had previously been approved suddenly was not okay. And there was a lot of talk within the firearm community and in forums and a lot of misinformation floating around. And then we got lawyers saying that's okay, but that's not okay. And somebody got charged out west, you know, but they happened to have, you know, the rumor is that they had marijuana on them as well. So, I mean, they got charged with the marijuana, and apparently there weren't even any bullets in the magazines, but they would hold 14 rounds. And so somebody got charged, you know, criminally with possession of these magazines, and I believe that we're still awaiting, you know, the outcome of that particular court case to maybe get some, you know, clarification, because right now as it stands, it's an interpretation of the current law. So, you know, like, I wasn't sure what was going on. I'd heard a lot of different things on the forums, and you know, so I decided, well, you know what, probably a good idea to ask. You know, so I began to ask around, and of course the CFO, you know, the CFO says that you can only load 2 rounds of 50 Beowulf into a 50 Beowulf magazine, as opposed to, you know, 5 rounds of 50 Beowulf, like the criminal code says you're allowed to have, or the Firearms Act rather says you're allowed to have. So, you know, 5 rounds in a centerfire rifle is the limit ordinarily. So here's this 50 Beowulf, and I'm going to use 50 Beowulf in it, but you're not getting the 5 rounds that you're supposed to be legally entitled to. Instead, you're getting 2 rounds, because apparently you can fit more than 5 rounds of 223 in it. So it's kind of flipped the other way around now. Now we can't put 14 rounds into these Beowulf magazines. We can't even put 5 rounds of Beowulf into a regular magazine. You got to put 2, which makes no sense. But anyway, the argument is that there had been no parliamentary change in law, but the interpretation of the law had changed. And so, basically somebody said that, it could be used this way, and they introduced this new term called dual purpose, and from what I understand, it's nowhere in the Firearm Act. So this dual purpose magazine now suddenly was bad, and you couldn't have those. So, you had to pin the magazines again. Anyway, so, I contact the CCFR lawyer. And the CCFR lawyer tells me very plainly that you are allowed to use 5 rounds of 50 Beowulf in a 50 Beowulf magazine if you're shooting it out of a 50 Beowulf, which makes complete sense to me, as long as the magazine was only ever generated for that purpose and been marketed as such, and as long as it's not of the Stanag magazine design, you're okay. And, that made sense to me because apparently the letter of the law is that the original ammunition designed to fit in that type of magazine. So I guess the, jump in logic was that all AR-15 magazines were the same, and they're based on this Stanag type design. They say, it's got the grooves, cut in it, and that typical AR-15 styling. And so you've got these types of magazines. Now, the Press Check Ventures don't look anything like that. They're square, they're boxy, they're made out of plastic. They share no parts in common whatsoever with the Stanag magazine design. They are completely proprietary. They were made and designed for a completely different purpose than 223, which is probably half the reason why they don't work most of the time. I've seen a lot of these magazines run with 223, being Beowulf magazines of different types, and I won't name any specific brands, but they don't always work. Perfectly, and some need a little fine tuning to get them to work that way. At least when we were still legal and able to use them legally. So anyway, so there's these magazines that don't share any parts with the Stanag magazine, and the argument is that you can only have 2 rounds of 50 Beowulf because it's a Stanag magazine or it's an AR-15 magazine. But the letter of the law says that the original magazine, original ammunition. That was designed to be put in that magazine. So if 50 Beowulf is the original ammunition designed to be put into that proprietary Canadian Press Check Ventures magazine, then why wouldn't you be allowed to have 5? And that was the rationale I kind of put forward. And I was just told that that's not the case. No, it's 2, and that's just the answer you're getting. And I believe the word corporate got thrown around. That's the corporate answer. And of course, things have changed. Certainly at one point it was okay, and then now it's not. And so now I have this magazine, and I've already filmed the video on the 50 Beowulf where we're shooting 5 rounds out of this 50 Beowulf magazine. And so, we filmed it, we released it, and then of course I consult all these different people, and they tell me that, no, you can only load 2 rounds in. And so now I'm thinking, we got to pull that video down, So for the people that saw it, we put it up and we filmed it before we had a straight and clear answer. And then, of course, we're backpedaling and pulling down a video, quite innocently. We seem to be in contravention of the rules. So here I am thinking, wow, I actually asked around for the correct answer. And was given several different ones from, the range was, yes, it's totally okay, to no, it's absolutely not. And one's coming from a lawyer and one's coming from the CFO's office, and I'm presenting a reasonable argument, that completely contradicts whatever logic dictates that you can only put 2 rounds into a 50 Beowulf. And I'm just told that that's not the corporate answer. And, the guy on the phone was fantastic. I feel bad for him because obviously he's been told, this is what we're telling people, and that's the end of it. And so, I throw this video up for all of 2 seconds, and people see it. And, then I got to pull it down. And it was doing really well. There was a lot of hits on the video very quickly. It could have gone viral and been very good for business. It hurt. My partner put a lot of work into, editing the video and making it look good. He does a fantastic job. And there's a lot of work involved. People don't understand. He's, in the editing room, more or less, and working on these things for, sometimes a dozen hours. There's a lot more involved to editing than I ever thought. And so he's put a lot of work into it, and we're pulling it down immediately because we have unknowingly, maybe perhaps just thrown it out there that we've, broken the law potentially. And I'm thinking, well, wow. I've never been in trouble in my life. And all of a sudden, maybe I just flashed, up on the big screen there, me breaking the law that could present a problem. And, there's no criminal intent. I certainly shopped around. And I think any reasonable person, given the circumstances, would think that there's maybe a problem with, only notifying people by way of an e-bulletin that not everybody reads. And then people, go to forums looking for answers, and you get different answers from different people. And I'm talking to a lawyer who says it's okay. And, the CFO is saying it's not, and we've already filmed it. And I'm thinking, wow, that happened fast. I could be in real trouble potentially, and, I brought it to Rod's attention at one point and said, this is, potentially a problem. And, I got to tell you, since that point, I had this realization that, the rules need to change and be simplified, and they certainly need to be made in a way that people can clearly follow them. I know this terrific group of people called the Canadian firearm community that just want to obey the law, and they're having difficulty doing it because it's so unclear. And not to bring us back to the advisory committee again, but we've got potentially a group of people that know nothing about the law who are going to start advising on how it should change. And what are we going to get? So the way it's currently written clearly needs to be scrapped. There's something needs to be done here. I think that if you asked around, anybody who knows anything about the Firearm Act would tell you that it is a silly mess that needs to be corrected. I think that if we're going to spend our money wisely as taxpayers, I think that it's really important that we ensure that we not only get a fair shake as the firearm community, but that we also make sure that our tax dollars are well spent generating rules that will be around after this government is gone. So my thinking is that we should definitely put a little pressure on Ralph Goodale's office and your member of parliament. Give them a call. Tell them that you're not satisfied with the idea of a bunch of people that probably don't know much about firearms and or may dislike firearms, probably shouldn't be on that panel. I'm going to encourage everybody to call in, right? Call your member of parliament and let them know, right? We're not going to take this one laying down. Well, that's my 2 cents going in the vault for tonight. Hope everybody's enjoyed the show. And I hope we haven't run into overtime here. Looks like we're coming in at around 13 seconds. Well, it's been great, folks. Thanks so much. Have a good night.